Dear students, in continuation with our previous Unit 3, that is Forms of Crime, we'll be continuing with this session wherein we'll talk about organized crime and its forms along with preventive measures. Earlier, we have discussed about various conventional crimes and white collar crimes, but with this particular session that we'll be discussing today, it's all about organized crimes, terrorism, and victimless crimes. Learning objective. With today's session, we'll be getting to know what organized crimes are, what are various types of organized crime, and how do we prevent it. Followed by what is terrorism, what are various types of victimless crimes, and how do we prevent this terrorism and victimless crimes. Learning outcome. Post this session, you'll be able to understand what are various types of organized crime, what is organized crime basically, and what are the preventive measures used for for preventing organized crime, followed by terrorism and victimless crimes, and what are various preventive measures associated with it for the prevention of terrorism and victimless crimes in the country. First, let's discuss about organized crimes. As the name suggests, organized crime is something which is defined as the continuing, structured, collectively committed crime of persons. It's a group of people who utilize criminality, violence, and willingness to corrupt in order to gain and maintain power and profit. It's a network of people who are associated in commission of crime, and the modus operandi includes various people from different divisions who has a willingness to get corrupted in terms of getting monetary benefits, wherein they utilize their power, they utilize their exposure towards criminality and violence. Organized crime is both social system and a social world. The crime is a system in which the composed of relationships based upon professional criminals, politicians, law enforcers, various entrepreneurs. All these people together forms an organized crime, wherein one supports each other in terms of commission of crime and gets a monetary benefit, all together as a group. Any group conducting an organized crime have a corporate structure such as primary objective is to obtain money through illegal activities, often surviving fear and corruption. Organized crime means a continuing unlawful activity by an individual, alone or as a group with a set of people who are associated, forming an organized group wherein the crime or on behalf of a syndicate crime using violence or threat of violence or other unlawful means with the objective of gaining benefits and gaining undue economic and other advantages associated with the crime. So, three key elements of organized crime is the group of people, the criminal network, the way they have formed it, and the criminal experts associated with. Now let's look into the characteristics of organized crime. First thing will be the teamwork. As the name suggests, organized crime is a network between a group of people. So teamwork is the first characteristics. Hierarchical structure, each person will be into some different domains of commission of crime. So the hierarchical structure also is one of the characteristic feature. Planning is the way of modus operandi how they commit the organized crime. Division of labor, people who are involved in it knowingly or unknowingly. Violence involved with respect to that organized crime, particularly. Effective control of its members, like how efficiently the people associated on a hierarchy in a larger scale, controlling the labor scale in performance of this organized crime. Organized criminal networks are involved in many different types of criminal activities, from like it is a it's spread across the entire world out of networks spanning various several countries, wherein the activities might include trafficking, that is human trafficking for prostitution, drug trafficking, illicit goods, weapons, exports and import, armed robbery, counterfeiting, and money laundering cases. All these things are characteristics type of organized crimes. Various types of organized crimes. You can look into organized gang criminality, wherein a person maintains a gang for robbing bank, hijacking, murder, kidnapping, and even automobile and jewel thefts, for example. And if you take one example, Dhanbad is a place in India wherein the major coal mining area. are the two prominent places are regarded as mafia operates in Bihar, because in this particular place the entire coal mining is being taken care by certain gangsters. Whereas gangsters act by the UP government in the year 1986 to meet these challenges of combating the mafia involved with it. Racketeering is a criminal activity which involves extortion of money from legitimate or illegitimate financial structure, either by means of threat or by means of enforced force put upon the person to get a monetary benefit out of it. It includes protection racket. It is an criminal entity like mafia which threatens people for money by giving extrajudicial service, illegal gambling operations, rigging for votes. All these things are set of racketeering. And syndicate crime is a very significant area of organized crime where syndicate create their own criminal procedure. This involves supply of illegal foods and services, smuggling, like illegal manufacture and sale of various goods, gambling, prostitution, foreign exchange, and there's money exchange involved, and various other violations as per the syndicate. So that's syndicate organized crime. Smuggling, one of the most common known organized crime, wherein smuggling often occurs in terms of various materials. It can be with respect to certain biodiversity species with plants or animals. For example, red sandalwood smuggling across borders of China and India, and various other forms of smuggling with respect to different countries associated with it. It is a highly prevalent criminal activity which involves humans, wildlife, and various drugs. Especially, this is seen where quite common between developed and developing countries. So smuggling is one such important organized crime to look into. So if you see various types of organized crime, it can be based upon nationality or ethnicity. For example, Chinese organized crime groups versus Russian organized groups and crimes. Criminal activity, it can be a property crime or human trafficking. Structure, it can be basically a mafia style versus street gangs, like who are also involved in organized crime. And if you talk about characteristics, it can be value systems such as in motorcycle gangs, or they have certain people associated. We often call them as sleeper cells, like who doesn't know like whom they are working for, like who doesn't know the boss, but then they'll get the monetary benefits from the higher authority. That's the reason they are involved into this organized crime. So if you talk about various organized crime, it can be currency counterfeiting, it can be certain child sexual exploitation, cyber dependent crimes, drug protection, drug trafficking, frauds. It can be with respect to excise fraud for import and export business, investment fraud, or stock marketing fraud, followed by illicit waste trafficking, which also happens between borders of India and Australia, wherein certain waste in India is being electrical waste in India is being trafficked to Australia. Intellectual property crimes, migrant smuggling, which often seen with migrants like crossing the borders. For example, Bangladesh migrants encroaching the borders of India. Organized property crimes and sports corruption, trafficking of endangered species for their valuable materials associated with animal, trafficking of firearms or certain ammunitions, and trafficking of human beings also for the purpose of employment or for the purpose of prostitution is also an organized crime to look into. Now let's talk about preventive measures associated with it. Technical capacity building and technical assistance are geared towards various aspects of organized crimes. So certain law enforcement authorities like CBI, CID, Intelligence Bureau, NIL, or raw, or followed by certain forensic science laboratory authorities, prosecutor, judges, and related people are also works in convergence with the detection of these particular crimes using certain scientific aids. Initiatives include support for the proper collection and analysis of criminal intelligence. I have just discussed RAW, NIA, IB, all this intelligence, including new modalities of interstate and international cooperation. Main thing that is required for the purpose of prevention is the cooperation between interstate, interborders, and between the countries there should be a cooperation in tracking down the various organized crimes, because whatever organized crimes often occurs, like it can be within the state, or it can be within the country, or it can be within different countries followed by. So that's the reason we need to look into the cooperation aspect, wherein people affected by of people of both the country being affected by organized crime have to jointly work together to nab the criminals in this particular organized crime thing. So this cooperation includes border management, strengthening criminal intelligence, and sharing of information about the potential offenders with respect to organized crime is a very key important role to look in. Now let's talk about terrorism and victimless crimes. Terrorism can also be defined as an unlawful use of violence or fear to achieve ideological aim. Uh, Despite terrorists being claiming that they have some ideological aim, but then terrorism is something which is done just to threaten people. At the same time, that they do not contain any ideological aim, even despite containing some ideological aim of getting a separate country or getting valued for their religion or something. But despite all this, the way that has been followed will of commission of crime or terrorism will often drop down the integrity of aim that they have kept as an ideology. International terrorism is often violent criminal acts like bomb blasts, serial killings committed by various individual and group of people inspired and associated with often sees in international terrorism. Domestic terrorism, like for example in India, if we take, we even have Maoists who are not satisfied with the government rules and protocols that have been formed over. So such people forms as a group and they tend to fight against the government with a dream of achieving, or with an ideological aim of achieving like what they are seeking for. That's domestic terrorism. Preventing measures first is to neutralize terrorist cells and operations that they carry out using certain intelligence boards for each country, and to help dismantle extremist network worldwide, cut off financing and other forms of support provided by foreign terrorist organizations. There are few organizations and countries who supports terrorism, so that financial cutoff has to be laid over to neutralize these particular activities being done. And if you talk about characteristic features of terrorism, no relationship, like terrorists, drug traffickers, and human traffickers remain independent, but operate within the same area. Despite not knowing each other, they often work for a same cause. And terrorist and criminal groups form mutually beneficial alliance and exchange operational support. It can be with respect to monetary benefit, or it can be with respect to the ammunition required. They often works as an alliance and operational relationship. And convergence, previously independent criminal and terrorist group alter their original aims and tactics and into a single entity that exhibits the feature of both. So that's these are preliminary features to look into for terrorism. Now let's talk about victimless crimes. So, as the name suggests, victimless crime is a crime or an illegal activity that does not have an identifiable victim, but then there will be an effect caused on the cultural norms of a community or a community values, attitudes, and beliefs, and there will be an economic loss for a country too. So these are victimless crimes. So if you look into this slide, like you'll get to know various forms of victimless crimes. It can be prostitution, it can be an assisted or influenced suicide, it can be trespassing, recreational drug use, drug possession, gambling, drug trafficking, public drunkenness, possession of contraband, public nudity, or homelessness. All these are actually victimless crimes. So, what is the preventive measures for these types of victimless crimes? Is that we need to supply reduction techniques, target the supply of drugs, like prostitution, gambling rings, and pornography. Here, whatever the techniques that's being followed for this particular interstate organized crime and which leads to an victimless crime, that supply has to be reduced. At the same time, we need to track down a group of people who are associated with it, and then we need to imprison them like for setup duration, for refinement or reformation to be happening, reducing the demand with illegal markets, which involves prevention, punishment, and treatment. Like whatever certain reducing demand with respect to commodities or with respect to humans for labor, all these things actually reduces the impact of this victimless crimes. Educational programs and awareness programs has to be created, despite being people from rural places. They don't know much about this victimless crime, like how this occurs, and they tend to fall prey. So educating people about victimless crime is a very such important preventive measure that has to be taken care of. So that's it with respect to today's session. Thank you so much. In case of any queries and concerns, please post your question to program repository link that is in FAQs. Thank you. Have a great day and happy learning.